if the core governance problems didn't exist and all that existed around this issue was the op return discussion, I would be very turned off by the narrative that, we're stopping spam with these filters. I would be saying things like, we could always make op returns that were this large. Like, what are you talking about? What's the problem? I would probably have a bigger problem. My problem with the op return debate is the fact that we're exploding the op return filter size, but that doesn't actually incentivize anybody to use it versus inscriptions. I think that it is irresponsible to do that without first closing that inscriptions discounted loophole for storing data, because otherwise the incentives are broken. And we don't need a fork to fix that. Any node can arbitrarily define what V bytes are. The only nodes that matter, though, are the miners in that discussion. If we can convince miners to change their definition of V byte, we can, without a fork, get rid of the SegWit discount, and we can stop these inscriptions. And I think that that's what we should do.
What I heard a lot from people that are discussing if they should run knots, and I only bring it up because I think it will probably come up in the comment section. I want to address it. Is people saying, "Oh, but knots is just run by Luke,"
and a lie.
Yeah, and can you explain what's the history of knots and why it's not just one person that they are all of a sudden dependent on?
Well, this argument is rooted in the history of knots. People claim that knots is only Luke because for a while it was only Luke. But obviously it's not only Luke in the sense that it's downstream from core. So all of the people contributing on core are implicitly contributing on knots. The argument is that Luke acting on his own and making these merges by himself and creating the, 6% difference in code bases, I believe it has the potential to inject code that could be malicious or any of these other things. And I say to those people, aren't you reviewing the code that you run? What's wrong with you? You're a developer. You understand Bitcoin. Aren't you reading it? And that should be the end of the argument, but it's also just a false argument. I moderate the Knots Discord now. Don't ask me why. I tend to get in a lot of fights there. But the amount of development that's going on there is pretty high. There's quite a large number of people actively involved in building knots at this point in time. And that has probably been buoyed by this op return argument that's happening. Anybody can look on GitHub, though, and categorically say it's false that nobody is building knots. And if your argument is that nobody's reviewing Luke's PRs, my question to you is, well, why the hell aren't you? If you run knots, you should. I do. I review Luke's PRs, so I can say at least one person does, but I know many others do. And aren't you reviewing your diffs? You can't just blindly trust developers. That's not how Bitcoin works. You're a developer. Blindly trust you, Robin.
Never trust your developers. They're always doing shit. I was in my previous company. I was 3-4 years developer, front end and back end. And so I started, I don't know, you probably don't care, but I started as a software tester, then just trying to break the software that we were producing, which is a very fun job, but it was boring after a while for me. And then I was a software developer, and then I went more into the client side. With client side, I mean talking with customers and talking with clients and kind of seeing the implementation, how it's done. And on all of those occasions, I made the whole part through the company. So I tested the software that the software team was doing. I was in the software team, and I sold the software that the software team was doing. And it's really interesting how you have the different roles in these companies. And one thing is 100% certain: the user will find bugs that you would have never found because you would have never came to the idea to use this piece of software in that sense, and that everyone can make mistakes. So never trust anyone, even though he might be the CTO or the most senior developer. he can make a mistake. So if you run software and you rely on that software, you better verify it. And that's, I think, a major learning that I had in my small career in software development.
I think a lot of people that aren't in software don't realize what you're saying, in that they treat uh, they're very used to appeals to authority. It's kind of how our society runs. We delegate trust, and they've chosen to delegate trust in software to you, the developer. And they don't maybe necessarily realize that that's not always appropriate. We should pick and choose our moments of trust. I'm not saying that you have to verify every piece of software you've ever run in your life. I'm saying, please, God, verify your money. Please, please, please. Just your money. That's it. That's the most important thing. Like, at least if you have money that to you would hurt to lose, please verify it. Please participate in it, just for your sake. But my sake too, because the more that people independently do this, the stronger we are together. The valuable properties of this network are emergent. They are part of the network topology collectively acting in their own self interest individually. And together we find that that self-interest is actually fairly unified. We all just want to protect our money and be private and left alone to do our business. And obviously we also don't want to be, enabling scams. I don't think that the core developers want to enable scams. I don't think that they want to enable CP, and they're not, right? Like, there's so much more that unites us than divides us, and we're creating kind of these artificial ways of limiting each other's ability to participate, be it the core devs and their refusal to allow anybody to participate that isn't making active PRs, or whether it's, the NOTS users, and we're like, oh, like, if you've made a scam before, we don't want to hear from your voice. Like, for example, the CTV activation. So much of the commentary around CTV's activation wasn't on the activation methodology, which is where I feel it should have been. They attempted a speedy trial, Jeremy Rubin did. And instead it was on the personal shitcoinery bullshit that Jeremy is interested in. It wasn't based on code, it was based on personalities. And I think that's because for most users, it is a more accessible thing to participate in and to comment on is the stupid shit people are individually and personally doing versus the technical side of the debate. But that's not where our focus should be. It should be on the technicals.
I think that's, if I remember correctly, I might be wrong here. I think Jameson Lopp also brought that argument up in my episode with him that I mean, that's it's a very
It's very
loaded
ironic
argument.
coming from Jameson Lopp, considering he is one of those people that sends a lot of that shade to Luke. It's not about Knots, it's about Luke. And I think that you see that actually from a lot. Like, everybody's human. It's what humans do, but like, it's worth calling out when it happens. Like, a lot of these people can make a very good argument and then immediately contradict themselves with an adjacent argument. Another example is Peter Todd. Peter Todd made some really good arguments about full RBF. He's like, it only takes 5% of nodes or less to propagate a transaction that everybody filters. You can double spend. The mempool isn't a hard state. Uh, we should just adopt full RBF. And he was right. And then the next second, he's like, oh, you're censoring me with your filters. You're censoring me. I can't propagate my transactions. It's like, well, which is it? Can any transaction propagate either through side channels or less than 5% of the gossip network? Or is it that filters work and are censoring transactions, Peter? You got to tell me. You can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't have it both ways. So it seems very common to me that we make arguments both from, very competent developers in the ecosystem and from the average user from a state of ideology. It's more about what we want personally than it is about the technical reality.
Interesting. I think also I remember he mentioned that he sees Knots as a distraction from more important issues around developing Bitcoin. I think he brought up covenants and CTV. I think that's what he brought up.
Which is interesting because the Knots camp is like actually pretty gung ho about things like CTV and CSFS. In fact, I just attended a little workshop that they were doing over there on the subject. They've got code in one of their branches for experimenting with CTV and CSFS. So I don't I don't accept that argument from Lop that it's a distraction. I think it is pretty clearly a distraction in the scope of the issues that we've been talking about and the kind of things that have gone on in core consensus issues like lot true, how forks are activated, the governance model of the reference implementation. Op return is such a nothing burger. I can definitely understand why people would say, "Oh, this is nothing." Like, why are we even talking about this? This is a distraction. And I think that's also informed by part by how, for the entirety of Bitcoin's history, core contributors have just been able to say, well, if you don't like something we're saying, if you disagree with our engineering, go run another client. Well, for the first time, we actually are. And I think that it's like kind of exploded in their face a little bit, backfired. And they're still on the same note. They haven't quite figured out how to change that message yet. Instead, they're just driving people away with their, typical engineering antisocial behavior.
I talked about that with Daniel White. He brought it up that like more social skills sometimes would be better, but it's a whole another thing. One thing I'm also interested in is how this whole debate will kind of end up. Do you foresee that we have maybe just like a dual or maybe even three implementations that like most people are running, or do you think like either side will win out, and also to the sense that run your own implementation, all of a sudden people actually doing that is like core kind of afraid that they're kind of getting irrelevant if more and more people just like if nobody runs the implementation.
God, I hope so. That so to the ends justify the means. People, I assume that that's the ends. I assume that the goal here is to get more people running different implementations, regardless of whether they make those choices based on misinformation, because it's good for the health of the network. A lot of the issues that I have problems with, for example, pushing consensus decisions, quite simply become impossible when core does not have a supermajority of the nodes on the network. They just don't have that ability to push things in a manner that they're going to deem state safe anymore without collaborating with other parties. And that to me is a beautiful, beautiful thing. There already are a lot more than three node implementations of varying competency and quality. I've mentioned three here just now, like Core Knots BTCD. There's also what's the one Libre that is Peter Todd's. It's just spams everything. Um, yeah, Bcoin, GoCoin. There's a bunch. Would I like to see more of them adopted? Yeah, I really absolutely would. That would be fantastic in my opinion. I'm worried a little bit about having a population of node runners that are so easily manipulated, but generally speaking, I'm very happy that more people are running knots.
Could it be in the future that node implementation is almost like, and hear me out on that wild comparison, is almost like a political party where, for example, in Europe, it's normal to have like three, four, five popular political parties, where usually two or three are pretty big, and there's like three, four. The third and the fourth one is a little bit smaller. Is that a future where this could end up being the Bitcoin ecosystem for node running?
It's a very possible future. And I mean, I think it goes back to what I was talking before about people are tribal by nature. They're going to pick a tribe. They're going to pick Coke versus Pepsi. They're going to pick Mac versus Windows versus Linux. And once they're in a camp, a lot of people find it difficult to extract themselves from that camp. It almost becomes like an extension of their person that they like Coca-Cola, you know? And I think that we're going to see that same kind of tribal thing and are seeing that same kind of tribal politic play out in these node camps. And I expect that to continue and further mature. And I don't necessarily think that's good. I think that a lot of the motivations for that tribal behavior aren't grounded in verification, they're grounded in ideology. And that could be dangerous for us down the road. I'm worried about that.
Because a lot of people also bring it up, and feel free to dodge that question if you don't want to go there, because it's pure speculation. What do you think? Satoshi would run, and where Satoshi on this argument would be, because a lot of people I see like, oh, like listen to what Satoshi said in the white paper, and I think he would run this. And I don't like that idea because it also is used usually from Bitcoin Cash people, these arguments.
Yeah, I think the idea of appealing to Satoshi is, I don't know how else to put this. Sorry, it's incredibly stupid. I think that appealing to any authority figure about what you should do with your node is incredibly stupid. I don't care what Satoshi's thoughts were. Have you read, some of that early Bitcoin code, Satoshi's code? He was not a competent developer by anything that you like. He wasn't a professional developer the way you or I would define a professional developer. He's got the stink of academia on his code. It looks like he's in R or MATLAB, when like it's magic numbers everywhere, spaghetti as long as you can twirl your fork. It's a mess of tightly coupled nonsense when you're looking at his code. And he made a lot of mistakes. He made a lot of mistakes both in the white paper and his assumptions about, for example, SPV proofs or purely statements of fact, like the longest chain is the most valid one. The longest chain isn't the most valid one. The most accumulative proof of work chain is the valid one. So like the descriptions in the white paper don't even match the code, and his expectations of the future were wrong. He was unilaterally deploying forks, just as, willy-nilly, everybody run this new version. This is new, and we're gonna fork. He was a benevolent dictator doing his best, but he wasn't some genius. He wasn't some, you know, master authority that we should be bowing to. I really have no respect at all for people that are like, oh, what would Satoshi do? It's like, why should I care? What are you talking about? No, let's talk about the code and its merit.
Bitcoin is and we like there's this two sides of it. Like the first side is like being grateful that Bitcoin is here, and being grateful that someone like put this in the world, that Satoshi Nakamoto put this in the world. But also at the same time, like Bitcoin is so much bigger than Satoshi Nakamoto. So like it is like it is, first of all, like very good that like he never came out and like he never claimed ownership, and we don't know who or he or she or they are. I think that's amazing, and I hope it will never happen. But even if it happens, like who cares? Like Bitcoin is so much bigger than this one person or group or like whatever.
That's exactly right. Like Bitcoin is me. Bitcoin is my node. As far as I'm concerned, Bitcoin's the code that I run. And if other people disagree with that, that's fine. As far as I'm concerned, they're not running Bitcoin. Um, I'm glad you mentioned Bcash because, and I'm sorry to my friends in the Knots community. I've spent a lot of this podcast, explaining problems I have with the Knots community. But one of them is that what they're doing in terms of argument deeply resembles the Bcash community. Arguments from ignorance, arguments that are emotionally charged. Obviously, there's nothing to fork about here. We're not talking about a network split. We're not talking about anything like that. But I have a huge problem with the debate. And I think what happened with Bcash is a good example of how that kind of misinformation can be leveraged to the significant harm of the user base dumb enough to follow it. Um, I don't want to be Bcash. I'm not interested in having a shit coin that, nobody can run a node on or anything like that. And to the Knots camp credit, they'd say, well, then don't allow spam, like reduce node resources. But that's just not realistic. There's always going to be spam, just like there's always going to be scammers. There always have been. I feel like a lot of people are just suddenly, this is maybe their first cycle, and this is their first time being exposed to some of these issues. Like they weren't around when Counterparty was being created. They weren't around for the dawn of shit coins. They didn't see all of this being done on Bitcoin in layers so many times already, and they haven't seen it being done elsewhere. So they're very worked up, and they're like, "Oh my goodness, is this the death of Bitcoin? Is Bitcoin going to die if we run Core V30?" And I'm like, "No, please, please, for the love of God, stop saying that. You make me embarrassed to be associated with you. I don't want to be a Bcasher."
Thank you for watching this video. This was only a snippet of the podcast. And if you want to watch the full episode and get all of the context of this episode, you can click right here or here. Oh, maybe also here.